Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is a possibly new series. I don't really know whether it'll be a new series. This is 6 games that I don't have, but I'm gonna go ahead and give you some brief thoughts on my experiences with those games. I'll find a better title for the actual video because that's a very long and not obvious title, but it's 6 brief thoughts on games. It's not necessarily first impressions, although I guess they are inherently first impressions, but it's also that I don't even have these games. In fact, some of these games I definitely won't be getting. In fact, it's actually divided up nicely. 2 of these games I will not be getting. 2 of these games I might get, and 2 of these games I am 100% getting. But the reason I'm doing this video is because for the 2 that I'm not getting, I want to share my thoughts with you on my experience with those games. For the 2 that I may be getting, I don't know if I'll actually be sharing my thoughts with you ever on those. Like if I have the chance, I might grab them, but I'm certainly not in a rush to. And then for the 2 that I am getting, well, those you can almost certainly expect to see dedicated reviews on at some point in the future. But here's some brief thoughts on my experiences until now. And in almost all cases, these are games I had the chance to play at either conventions or, well, I guess mostly conventions. Like could be friends' copies, might be in the future, but all 6 of these were games I played at conventions, hence not having the games. And yes, if it becomes a regular series, maybe I'll try to do a jingle for it like I have for some of my other series. Anyways, we're going to go through these in order from least to most liked, timestamps down below in case you want to check them out. And I'm going to start off with Invincible from Direwolf. Invincible from Direwolf is very, very well liked. Like, it was a very well liked. At Dice Tower East, I actually didn't play it at Dice Tower East. Actually, I did play a friend's copy. This was actually a friend's copy. Dice Tower East, it was, you know, when I was at Dice Tower East, it had just come out at that point, and people were very excited about it. I wanted to get a chance to try it then, and I didn't get a chance to try it then. But some point later, at a friend's house, they had a copy, and we sat down and played it. And I was very excited for it because I had heard that it was like the Invincible IP, which I do like. And it kind of has the Marvel United kind of vibes, a little bit more teamwork stuff going on, and that intrigued me. And I played it, and it completely fell flat for me. Like, this is the kind of game that had, like, if I had an official review copy, I'd be like, okay, great, time to play games 2 and 3 and figure out whether I like it. But this wasn't a review copy, it was a friend's copy, and I didn't feel the need to keep playing. Now, granted, that sometimes does mean that you are leaving an excellent game on the table, because sometimes it does take games more than one play to shine. One of the benefits of doing review copies, of signing up for review copies, is that pressure to give a game multiple plays to properly put out a review on it sometimes can expose a brighter gem under the surface. More often than not for me, meaning more often than not, my initial impressions do last throughout further plays, but there are definitely exceptions. There are enough times where it's the exception. And this might be one of those times, but I think my main problem is Invincible has a little bit of deck building kind of going on where you're paying these resources in to get more cards and better cards into your deck, but I felt that was way too slow and not rewarding enough. I mean, coming from Dune Imperium, which has so much more deck building going on, the overall puzzle of dealing with the enemies didn't feel quite rewarding enough either. It kind of felt fairly obvious as far as a cooperative game where you work together and make somewhat obvious choices, assign your dice to the various areas that will help you the most, but like, it really didn't feel, was it dice or was it bag building? I think it was bag building in hindsight. But it just really didn't feel like the experience gave me any strong agency outside of the deck building, and that was not rewarding enough because it didn't have enough of an impact on the game. Now again, this is one play, keep in mind, and some of these, I think, some of these actually do have multiple plays, some was only one play. Invincible is one play, and it definitely did not leave me interested in continuing to play it. For me, ranking initially off that one play would be a 3 out of 5. It's still not bad, it's still a fine game, but it just didn't impress me in a genre full of games that I want to table as far as the cooperative superhero genre. There's so much going on there. Coming in at number 2, we had Invincible for the first one. We have River of Gold from Office Dog Games as our second game. River of Gold is one that I actually do have several plays of. River of Gold, I got a few plays of this one. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I said it's like conventions, and I said it's only conventions, might be friends copies. Turns out it's conventions, friends copies, and Board Game Arena. This is one where I played a few times on Board Game Arena. I have actually not played this game physically yet. But my first play of River of Gold, I was kind of not really totally sure what was going on, and I played it, and then I was like, oh, okay, fine, let's dive into it again. And then subsequent plays kind of fell flat for me. The premise of kind of understanding how things went together made me more excited after game 1. So this is actually a time where my initial, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I love this. I was like, okay, I see the puzzle now. Let me dive back in because I'm excited to try the puzzle. but then it just didn't work for me. Now again, it's well liked overall. The presentation's amazing. The board with this gold foil, very, very cool. Ultimately, you're basically rolling dice and then assigning them to actions, either building buildings along this river, moving your ships along a river, or delivering goods to these various advisors who will then give you ongoing benefits. You're trying to get area control within each region. For whatever reason, the whole puzzle didn't fully come together for me. I never felt, again, same kind of problem as Invincible. I never felt the decisions were that difficult to make. I didn't feel the game came together as much as I'd like. I felt every time I played it, it felt like it kind of ended abruptly. Like it didn't feel like there was a proper crescendo to the game. It kind of felt like, oh, we're working towards that endpoint, and then boom. Like just every time I played, 75% of the way through the game, or at least perceptionally at the 75% point, it's like game over now, and that kind of always left me just wanting to do more. And so again, not a bad game. This one had a little bit more things going on. We're already at a 3.5 out of 5 on this. This would be one that, again, I enjoyed it. In theory, there's a chance I pick it up one day, maybe if I play it more and it changes my mind. As it stands, I can see why somebody would enjoy it. For me, the fact that I always felt like the game ended just as I was picking up speed is part of why this one unfortunately did not work as well for me. Coming in number 3 out of 6 over here, we have Cities from Devere Games. Cities is a totally fine game. It falls into that category of that point scoring optimization where you're kind of trying to decide which row to draft from. There's a little bit of worker placement and trying to figure out, oh, I want these different things from different rows. There's different types of goods you're going to be, not goods, but like buildings and stuff you're placing out, tiles, buildings, all these stuff you're trying to gather from different rows on the board. And as you go there, you're getting first agency, first pick over certain aspects or things that you want. It's basically worker placement to gather things that you then put into your tableau to score as many points as possible based on criteria scoring that you've earned, based on the actual tiles that go down. So it's kind of just tile laying with worker placement to gather the tiles and the point scoring criteria. I think if this game had either a different theme or art, I might be more invested, because the gameplay itself was actually pretty fine, but I just wasn't pulled in by the visual aesthetic of the game. And it's fine. It actually, like, from the box itself looks fine. The components, I just wasn't pulled in by it. And I think that there's so many games within this genre of point scoring optimization that while I did enjoy Cities, and I thought it was a pretty good game, there are so many great games in this genre. Like, this is one, it was a 3.5 out of 5 for me. I could see it bumping up a bit potentially, but honestly, even if it got to a 4, there's still so many 4.5s and 5s that I have in this genre. Like, it kind of feels like a game like Spectacular, but I'd rather play Spectacular any day of the week, or Cascadia, or Harmonies. I mean, Harmonies and Spectacular are two really strong contenders for games in that genre that came out this year, and so Cities to me kind of is overshadowed by those other games. This one I actually played at Dice Tower East in person, so I enjoyed it. I think it's a good game worth picking, no, not worth picking up. It's a good game worth trying and seeing where it falls for you. For me, I liked it, and I prefer other tile-laying puzzles more. Coming in at number 4, we have Comic Hunters. This is one that I've actually played a few times. I played it twice at Dice Tower East, and then once more after that at, was it Gen Con? I don't know what it was. But Comic Hunters either way. Comic Hunters. Comic Hunters, and this one I actually might have a dedicated review on this at some point, because someone actually gifted me, a viewer of the channel gifted me a copy, or lent me a copy, or whatever it is, so that I can go ahead and cover it. So you might get dedicated coverage on this one. Comic Hunters is an interesting one for me. It's put out by a combination of, oh my gosh, Spin Master and Arcane Wonders. It's a Dice Tower Essentials game. And my first play of Comic Hunters, honestly, for all my talk of how a game usually stays the same here, I'm like, oh, River of Gold, and my first play was exciting, and my second one was... River of Gold wasn't exciting the first play. River of Gold was, I was excited to dive into the second play now that I understood it all, or felt I understood it. Whereas Comic Hunters, I actually really enjoyed my first play, and then it kind of went down for me after that. Comic Hunters ultimately plays out across 4 rounds, and you're collecting comics. It's set collection. That's all it really is, a set collection with comics. What gives the game the charm is you're collecting these comic books. You're collecting a bunch of Black Panther comics and a bunch of Green Lantern comics, and there's a variable scoring to which comics are more expensive, more valuable any given game you play, as well as which other facets you're trying to collect, which I don't even know what they are, but there's different kind of symbols on the various comics that go into this other set collection thing where you're racing other people to have the most of in order to score a whole chunk of extra points. But in each of the 4 rounds, there's going to be each of the 3 rounds. In each of the 3 rounds, there's going to be different ways you try to gather comics, and then you display your comics effectively. So each one has little mini puzzles of how you gather cards. So pretend for a second that I told you that Comic Hunters was a game where you drafted cards in order to get comics, and that was your set collection. And then you present your comics, you've drafted cards, and that's your set collection. That's what Comic Hunters is, except instead of drafting cards, it's a whole bunch of little mini games. Sometimes you're drafting cards, sometimes you're bidding on sets of cards, sometimes you're doing this whole little tableau of how you place cards out and then take rows and columns of identical things. There's a little mini game going on of how you gather comics, so it's constantly shifting up the little puzzles as to what you're doing to gather those comics. When you're done gathering those comics, before you display them, you can go ahead and trade comics in to pay for the comics that you're displaying. Kind of a little aspect where extra stuff you get is not necessarily utilized, it's cashed in, which honestly I think that's the biggest problem I have with the game. Because to me, that takes away a lot of the challenge of getting the things you want, since inherently as you play Comic Hunters, there's a whole bunch of stuff you know is going to be discarded to pay for your other stuff. Which means as you play, it's not as penalizing to not get the stuff you need. Getting extra stuff that you use to pay for the stuff you need is part of the puzzle, but that also takes the tension away. And I think I really didn't like that aspect. Part of the reason I probably enjoyed my first play the most is it was only halfway through the game before I actually found out that, oh, we're discarding these cards to pay for our collection. Which means I did spend the entire time, at least the first half of the game, really trying to gather the comics that I wanted the most. And I think that might be the element as far as taking away a lot of the tension of the game. Ultimately, I still enjoy Comic Hunters. I think it's got a little puzzle, it's got some charm. It is a fun experience, but not a must-have experience for me. It's a 3.5 out of 5. Coming in at 5 out of 6 over here, we have Bardwood Grove from Final Frontier Games. Bardwood Grove is one of the two. The last two over here are ones I definitely 100% plan on picking up, and you can almost certainly expect a review at some point, but I need to first get the game and then play the game more. But Bardwood Grove, designed by Carl Van Ostrand, put out by Final Frontier. I had a chance to play this once at actually Level Up Retreat 2024, I guess. 2024, Level Up Retreat 2024, the beginning of this past year. I had a chance to play it with Carl Van Ostrand, and I really enjoyed the sheer amount of things that were going on in the game. You basically play as a bard, and you're trying to compose your song. There's a little bit of a deck-building puzzle, but this sequence of the play, it's a little weird because you're kind of going for this vibe where you spend a few turns building up your song, and then you play your song, cashing in on all the stuff your song does, and then trying to figure out where and what you want to do with this song that you've spent the past few turns composing. Which is a really interesting puzzle as far as the tempo of the game, where you're not always doing things, but you're building up towards doing things. But then there's so many stuff going on the board, as far as the different things you can do, that I found that I was able to do a lot and feel like I got a good experience from the game, while also feeling like I had barely tapped into all the various other things going on in the game. Now, word of warning on this one, this is definitely a first play only game, and I think, on the one hand, I think that I'm not worried about the game feeling too samey. Sometimes the reason a game goes down after the first play is because it feels like the same experience each time. And because of the amount of things I didn't even touch in the game, the amount of things I didn't even expose myself to, that means I'm not worried about it feeling the same each time. I think there'll be a decent puzzle as far as all the stuff you can do on this sort of, not really worker placement, but worker movement with a little bit of deck building and a timed escalation. So I really enjoyed what it does. I think that enjoyment will hold up across multiple plays, but anything can happen. It would not be the first time that I've really liked a game after play one, and then it kind of dropped down to it's a good game. It's a good game, and unfortunately, good games I don't really keep. As of right now, Bardwood Grove, I am very excited to play more. I enjoyed my first and only play of it quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to the final game. Tentative rating, my instinctive rating is that it would be a 4.5 out of 5, but really take that with a grain of salt until I get multiple plays under my belt. The last one is Beyond the Horizon. Beyond the Horizon from Cranial Creations is a re-implementation of Beyond the Sun from Rio Grande Games. So kind of same game, but different setting, some changes to it. This is the one that I had a chance to play at World Series of Board Game, and also only one play, although to be fair, I've played Beyond the Sun a whole bunch, and it's very much the same engine with some tweaks on top of it. In Beyond the Horizon, what you're doing is you're basically building out these techs. All you're really doing is trying to build out techs. You unlock access to a new tech, other players now have access to that tech, and there's a little bit of a, not really worker placement, but every turn you try to decide which tech you gain access to as you manage your own personal tableau and your resources. But then what Beyond the Horizon adds is it kind of shifts the little space map from Beyond the Sun into a more of a full-on board as you explore to different areas and then reinforce those areas, which felt much more thematic and more understandable than the little space puzzle you had in Beyond the Sun. So overall, I like the art and presentation. The art and graphic design I felt was much better. The sideboard aspect, where you're kind of dealing with an area control puzzle, as opposed to what is still kind of an area control puzzle, but felt less, I guess, intuitive in Beyond the Sun. I like what they do more in Beyond the Horizon. There are still some component issues and things that are just kind of weird. Like you have these little goblets where you're kind of putting tokens on top of that really aren't stable or functional anyway. Like I'm sure somewhere on Etsy, someone's gonna have better tokens for it because you need better tokens. But ultimately, I really enjoyed Beyond the Horizon, the one play I had of it. And again, I do need to get another copy and finally properly play it, more and enjoy the experience and see where it goes. But because it's based so heavily on Beyond the Sun, a game I've played dozens of times, I do think this is one that is likely to have staying power and to feel good, I guess. I don't know. Like the main reason Beyond the Sun, Beyond the Horizon is higher than Bardwood Grove here isn't even that I like it more. It's specifically the fact that there's more reason to believe in the longevity of that rating as opposed to Bardwood Grove. I kind of really need more plays under my belt. And so Beyond the Sun, Beyond the Horizon, I'm going to say that all the time, is another tentative 4.5 out of 5. Need more plays under my belt, but it's probably in that range. Anyways, these are your 6 little mini first impressions / thoughts on games you may or may not get final reviews on. Again, some of them I expect, others not so much. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.